Hi, this is Jim Malloy, Lexington Town Manager, and I'll be providing the highlights of the fiscal year 24 budget and the results of financial initiatives that have been put in place over the past several years. Over the past few years, the town faced many challenges, including how we provide services at the level the community expects, how public meetings are held, and generally recruiting and retaining high-quality staff. Fiscal year 24's budget was just as big of a challenge due to inflationary pressures, a large cost increase for curbside sanitation services, and several large labor contracts that settled during the past year. Similarly, the school department has seen cost increases related to the return to school after the pandemic and special education costs. Both the municipal staff and school staff worked diligently to develop this budget that would provide the necessary funding to continue providing the quality services the community has come to expect. The initial fiscal year 24 budget provided a 3.9% increase over fiscal year 23 for both the school and municipal departments, which resulted in tight budgets, including cuts on the municipal side. However, in late February, the governor released her budget, and there was a substantial increase in state aid that resulted in a final revenue that is a 5.14% increase over fiscal year 23. We have continued to plan for the future by setting aside free cash into the capital stabilization and OPEB funds and added funding back into the Special Education Stabilization Fund and are recommending the creation of a new Special Education Reserve Fund that will provide greater flexibility to the school department to deal with emerging costs related to special education. We are recommending the creation of a new refuse and recycling collection revolving fund for the purpose of covering the town's costs for curbside collection of bulky items and white goods, and have created a new standalone health department and renamed the Land Use Health and Development Department the Land Use Housing and Development Department. On general fund revenues, you can see that the largest revenue continues to be property taxes at 81.1% of the town's revenue sources. State aid at 7.1%, local receipts at 5.3%, the use of available funds at 6.7%, and the balance is revenue offsets and enterprise funds. Total general fund revenues for fiscal year 24 is $276.9 million, up $12.5 million from fiscal year 23. From the table to the right, you can see the large increase in state aid this year, estimated at 15.14%, or approximately $2.6 million. This slide shows the town's actual revenue growth from fiscal year 12 through fiscal year 22, and the estimated revenues for fiscal year 23 and 24, as well as the year-to-year percentages increases in revenue growth. For the first half of this period, the town experienced an average annual revenue growth of 5.6% versus the second half of this period, where we experienced a 4.2% annual revenue growth. Despite the reduction in percentages, the actual dollar value has increased from an average of $8.6 million during the first half of this period to $10.1 million during the second half of this period. This slide contains the Select Board's budget priorities for fiscal year 24, which include sustainability, solar, maintaining public access television services, pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle safety improvements on town roads, fiscal stability, and capital improvement planning. Our vehicle policy regarding EVs is now being implemented, where all vehicles have to go through a life cycle cost analysis to determine whether an EV is a better option. Our building designs, including the police station and HVAC improvements at the town office building, take climate impact into consideration. The new police station includes a solar canopy to bring the building to 95% or more toward making the building net zero. We're recommending ongoing funding to support public access television, and as part of the financial plan, have included the first sustainable funding source for the Capital Stabilization Fund to ensure that we minimize the impact on the existing tax base of future large capital projects such as the high school, but we'll have more on that later. Finally, we've begun moving forward on the municipal and school 20-year capital improvement program that town meeting funded a few years ago and that the town completed during 2022, with several preliminary steps to begin addressing those buildings that have been identified as the highest priority for improvements. This slide shows the three major cost centers for the town's budget: education, municipal, and shared services. As you can see from this slide, there is virtually no change from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24 in the ratio of spending for these cost centers. The education budgets are increasing from $131.5 million to $138.25 million. Shared expenses are increasing from $65.8 million to $68.8 million, and municipal departments are increasing from $44.8 million to $47.1 million. This slide breaks down the overall spending by each department, with education and benefits being the two largest expenses, consisting of 72.4% of the overall town budget, with public facilities at 5.7%, the DPW at 5%, police at 3.6%, administration at 3.3%, fire department at 3.2%, debt service at 2.7%, the library at 1.3%, the IT department at 1.1%, and all other remaining departments consisting of the remaining 2% of spending. The fiscal year 24 capital plan includes approximately $30 million in improvements as listed on this slide, including the solar canopy at the police station, Lincoln Park field improvements, infrastructure improvements, pre-funding of the new housing trust, an addition and renovation, including accessibility improvements to the Monroe Center for the Arts, design work for future projects, other town and school building envelope projects, systems and technology improvements, and the lead and copper replacement program in the Water Enterprise Fund. We wanted to note that the funding for the Lexington High School project is anticipated in the fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 27 timeframe. This slide shows the town's various reserve funds and balances over the past 10 completed fiscal years, being fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 22. During that time period, the Special Education Stabilization Fund has gone from $1,069,000 to $656,000. The fiscal year 24 budget plan includes adding $500,000 back into this stabilization fund. The General Stabilization Fund has grown from $8.7 million to $10.2 million. The Other Post-Employment Benefits Fund, or OPEB fund, from $3 million to $23.5 million. And the Capital Stabilization Fund from $1.6 million to $21.7 million. Again, there'll be a little bit more on the Capital Stabilization Fund shortly. Some future considerations. We will need to continue to manage operating expenses to align with revenue growth, which has become increasingly challenging and may require realigning the municipal, school, and shared expense budgets in future years. Future debt service is expected to include the renovation or reconstruction funding for Lexington High School, which will need to be excluded from Proposition 2.5. The town has started planning for new capital construction projects as identified in the facilities 20-year capital plan for both school and municipal buildings, and the fiscal impact of the Hartwell Avenue zoning initiative and new commercial development such as the PSDUPs, as discussed under the town's new fiscal guideline for dedicating new levy revenue growth to capital projects, is expected to relieve the residential tax burden related to these capital projects. Taken as a whole, the annual budget is a one-year strategic and operating plan for the town government, so it has great importance. At this point, I'd like to review some of the other financial planning the town has undertaken during the past 5 years. When I was appointed in fiscal year 2018, it was clear that Lexington had excellent financial management. But during the past 5 years, I believe we've made a number of changes that has strengthened the town's financial management. In 2021 to 2022, the town created a working group consisting of members of the Select Board, School Committee, Appropriation Committee, Capital Expenditures Committee, and the town's financial staff that undertook discussions regarding how best to mitigate the debt service impact anticipated from the proposed high school project. We heard from town meeting members and others in the community that we needed to encourage economic development to help offset the impact on existing taxpayers. We developed a proposal to utilize the net new tax revenues from the rezoning project at Hartwell and any PSDUP projects on an ongoing basis into the Capital Stabilization Fund to provide financially sustainable manner in which to mitigate the debt service impact of this very large project. We referred to this as the Capital Stabilization Framework. This slide shows the projected debt service on the new high school using a level payment method, which shows the full debt service of $18 million being added to the existing taxpayer base if we had not created the Capital Stabilization Framework. All of these calculations are based on a $400 million high school project on a 30-year debt issuance, net of a 25% MSBA reimbursement, and then calculated at a 4% interest rate. Fiscal year 24 is the first year of implementation of the Capital Stabilization Framework, where we are now putting over $1.7 million of net new property taxes from various projects that fall under the Capital Stabilization Framework into the Capital Stabilization Fund to be used toward the debt service for the high school. As you can see from this slide, in the first full year, we are shifting the impact for the debt service from the high school project to 90.4% of the existing tax base, and 9.6% being covered from these new economic development projects. The good news is that these are not the only projects that fall into this category. This slide shows the impact of 3 additional projects that are in the works with approvals granted at this point in time and are in various stages of development. Based on the approvals, these projects are estimated to increase the funding going into the Capital Stabilization Fund by these various amounts. The variation is based on the current assessed value versus the potential future value. This, in turn, is based on the current assessed value for similar types of buildings on a per square foot basis, multiplied by the size of the proposed buildings. The addition of 95 to 99 Hayden, 440 Bedford Street, and 12 to 18 Hartwell, once completed, are anticipated to add an additional 59.6% shift from the existing taxpayer base for a total of 66.5% and leaving 33.5% of the debt service for the new high school impact falling onto the existing tax base. We will be providing an ongoing update to town meeting as these projects progress, and once the actual new values are established, the exact amounts that will be going into the Capital Stabilization Fund. This slide shows the impact of those same 3 scenarios on the average single-family home using the fiscal year 23 figure for the average single-family home value. It has not been indexed for the first year that debt is estimated to be added to the tax rate, which is in fiscal year 29. If there was no capital stabilization funding provided, the impact to the average single-family home is shown on the first bar to the left and would be $1,544, or an 8.8% increase. Given the amount that we are already setting aside as of fiscal year 24, the impact is shown on the second bar would be $1,396, or an 8% increase. The third bar shows the anticipated values for the 3 new developments that have been approved and estimates the impact would be reduced to $518, or a 3.0% increase on the average single-family home. Some other changes that we've made include phasing out the use of free cash to support the town's operating budget and building the annual replacement of water and sewer lines into the operating budgets as part of the annual rate instead of borrowing. Using free cash was phased out over a 5-year period from fiscal year 20 to 24. In fiscal year 19, the town was using $3.5 million of free cash to support the ongoing operating expenses of the general fund budget and was issuing debt for various capital projects in an equal amount. By phasing out the use of free cash, the town is now using these funds to replace capital through the cash capital program, avoiding the annual interest costs of issuing debt for this amount of capital replacement. The town estimates the lifespan of water and sewer lines to be 100 years, and every year the town endeavors to replace 1/100th of the underground infrastructure. For the water department, this is $2.2 million per year, and for the sewer department, this is $1 million per year. In the past, the town has borrowed 100% of these funds. We are now in our 4th year of phasing this out over 10 years and building this cost into the annual operating budgets of the water and sewer funds, since these are ongoing expenses. By doing this, at the end of the 10th year, we will have removed $3.2 million per year from debt service in these departments, or $32 million every 10 years. A larger issue here is that by repeating these debt issuances each year, there's a compounding effect of the interest costs. Added together, the $3.5 and $3.2 million, the town was issuing $6.7 million in debt each year that we are now avoiding the interest cost. Not yet entirely for the water and sewer, but will be by a few years. Over the 10-year period, which won't be completed until fiscal year 32, the town will be avoiding just over $11 million per year in interest costs that we were absorbing in the debt service budget. This avoidance will reduce the overall cost associated with spending on these items by 16.5%. This slide shows the benefits of maintaining excellent financial management and continuing to avoid unnecessary expenses relating to debt. Over the past 5 years, and adding the high school project, the town has undertaken a number of large capital projects as shown in the box in the upper left-hand part of the slide. Lexington continues to maintain a AAA bond rating by Moody's, which is the highest bond rating we can achieve. Every time we issue debt, we go through a review with Moody's, and they reconsider our bond rating. The tools we've implemented in the previous slides, combined with the existing excellent overall financial management of the town, which includes continued funding of our OPEB liability and being on target to reach full funding of our retirement system in fiscal year 30, are all considered every time we meet with Moody's. The graph on this slide uses interest rates on municipal bond sales on a national basis for AAA rated bond issuances, AA rated bond issuances, and single A rated bond issues. Double and single would be what would occur if the town had a bond downgrade. If Lexington was rated AA, the additional interest costs for these projects that are listed up in the upper left-hand side would equal $29.1 million over the life of the debt service. And if we were rated single A, the additional interest costs would be $40.5 million over the life of the debt service for these projects. Please note this didn't happen, as some of these projects have already occurred and debt has already been issued. This is theoretically what could occur if our AAA bond rating was not maintained. Additionally, I would add that I don't see this happening because the town will continue to manage our finances in a responsible manner using best management practices. All of the successes we've had would not be possible without the support and guidance, and at times, adopting policies that have long-term benefits but are difficult in the short term of the Select Board, the Appropriation Committee, and the Capital Expenditures Committee. And certainly none of this would be possible without the ongoing support of town meeting. Thank you.